China just hit U.S. exports with a staggering 125% tariff. But that's only the surface. The real story lies in what came next. Beijing quietly began cutting ties with the U.S. dollar, rerouting trade, and executing moves so deliberate and so precise that by the time Washington fully reacts, it might already be too late. This isn't traditional retaliation. It's not a tit-for-tat trade spat. What's unfolding is a strategic decoupling, and it's happening far faster than most in the West are willing to admit. In April 2025, China imposed harsh tariffs on American cars, tech machinery, and semiconductor components. These industries accounted for more than $36.4 billion in U.S. exports last year, according to Commerce Department data. The timing was no coincidence. Just 72 hours earlier, President Trump had approved $88 billion in new tariffs targeting Chinese EVs and rare earths. Analysts at Bloomberg described China's counter as a precision strike, not just economic pushback, but a carefully calibrated message. Yang, senior advisor at Peking University, summed it up. Beijing is deliberately targeting sectors with high political leverage. This is surgical. Every move hits where it hurts most, politically and economically. Markets reacted instantly. Tesla suspended shipments to China, sending investors into panic. Deere & Company lost $2.1 billion in market value within 2 days. U.S. soybean futures dropped 4.3%, reflecting fears that the trade escalation could spill into agriculture. But beneath those headlines, something deeper was shifting. This isn't a short-term response. It's a structural repositioning. According to China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, Beijing reduced its U.S. Treasury holdings to $668.6 billion in the first quarter of 2025, the lowest level in 15 years. But that's just the beginning. Major Chinese banks, including the China Construction Bank and ICBC, reportedly halted all new dollar-denominated loans for state-owned projects. Instead, they're switching to financing in renminbi or euros. Reuters confirmed that this shift is part of a broader internal insulation strategy, a deliberate effort to limit China's exposure to U.S. trade, finance, and commodities systems. This isn't mere risk management, it's strategic disengagement. Goldman Sachs economist Maggie Wei described it plainly. China is engineering a soft retreat from dollar liabilities, a move to preempt future financial sanctions. On April 11th, China's Ministry of Commerce used a curious phrase in an official statement. Certain U.S. imports were no longer commercially viable. At first, it sounded like bureaucratic jargon. But it was far more strategic. By labeling American goods as inefficient, not politically targeted, Beijing shielded itself from WTO complaints while signaling domestic firms to start cutting ties. The effect was immediate. BYD, China's largest EV maker, dropped a $500 million sensor supply deal with a U.S. company just days after that statement. Trade law expert Henry Gao from Singapore Management University called it a regulatory green light for disengagement disguised as market logic. This marks a turning point. Market-driven decoupling is becoming the rule, not the exception. Even Washington's allies are adjusting to the new reality. In March 2025, Germany's BASF signed a €7.2 billion expansion deal in Guangdong, its largest investment outside Europe, despite U.S. pressure to reduce reliance on Chinese supply chains. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia completed its first-ever crude oil trade with China settled entirely in digital Yuan, bypassing the U.S. dollar. According to the Financial Times, France is lobbying for a BRICS EU Observer Forum, while Brazil is pushing for regional payment systems that can interact without dollar dependence. These are not isolated moves. They represent a global pivot, a gradual restructuring of trade and finance that's reshaping the entire international order. China is quietly redrawing the world's economic map, redirecting capital flows, rebuilding supply chains, and building the infrastructure for dollar-independent trade. The headlines in the United States focus on tariffs and market losses, but the real transformation is structural and possibly irreversible. As China reduces its dollar exposure, turns to new currencies, and instructs its corporations to source away from American suppliers, it's not merely reacting. It's redefining global economics. By the time policymakers in Washington grasp the full implications, the game may already have changed. China's actions are not impulsive. They're deliberate, methodical, and built to last for decades. Every tariff, regulation, and financial adjustment fits into a long-term plan to decouple critical sectors from the United States. Citibank strategist David Lubin put it bluntly, "A multipolar trading order is emerging, and Washington is no longer the default center. If United States allies stop aligning their trade policies with America's, how long before China stops being the outsider? America's sanctions toolkit is reaching its limit, and Beijing knows it." By April 2025, the United States had sanctioned over 640 Chinese entities, according to Treasury Department data. Yet, China's trade remains resilient. Exports to ASEAN nations grew 7.4% year-over-year in the first quarter, offsetting declines from the United States market. The message is clear. While Washington tightens restrictions, Beijing is adapting, not retreating. What started as a tariff skirmish has evolved into a strategic reordering of the global economy, one where China is no longer reacting to United States policy, but writing its own rules. Meanwhile, the weaponization of the dollar is starting to lose its sting. United Nations data shows that cross-border payments using non-dollar currencies through SWIFT rose to 6.3% globally, up from just 2.2% in 2020. Even the semiconductor chokehold, long viewed as America's ultimate advantage, is slipping. Huawei recently unveiled a 7-nanometer chip produced using Chinese lithography tools combined with Dutch equipment stockpiled before the export bans took effect. Analysts at Tech Insights were, honestly, stunned. The irony couldn't be clearer. Sanctions meant to slow China are actually speeding up its innovation. Former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer even admitted at a Heritage Foundation briefing, "We underestimated their ability to work around us." If sanctions are backfiring, what's left in Washington's arsenal? Wall Street isn't waiting for an answer. On April 10th, the Dow Jones plunged 1,000 points, erasing more than $520 billion in market value after China's tariffs struck U.S. agriculture, industrial machinery, and EV components. Shares of Archer Daniels Midland tumbled 11% in just 2 days. Deere & Company warned investors that over $3.2 billion in Chinese-bound inventory could face immediate disruption. Goldman Sachs cut its second quarter GDP forecast for the U.S. from 2.3% to 1.5%, citing both the direct hit from retaliatory tariffs and the indirect drag from falling exports. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg, "Markets are signaling what the administration hasn't fully processed. This isn't a trade fight. It's an economic firebreak." But beyond markets, there's a human side to this story. What happens when corporate America starts pushing for a truce, even as political tensions keep rising? Xi Jinping isn't chasing short-term wins, he's planning for endurance. Since 2021, China has increased domestic chip production by 34% annually, according to the China Semiconductor Industry Association, while cutting U.S. soybean imports from 32 million metric tons in 2018 to just 9.4 million in 2024. Beijing has also locked in multi-year grain deals with Argentina and Kazakhstan to buffer against supply shocks, while boosting sovereign food reserves by 18% year-over-year. In April, PBOC Governor Pan Gong confirmed that China's foreign reserves are being restructured, shifting away from dollar-heavy assets to strengthen its defenses against U.S. leverage. Meanwhile, Trump faces an economy under pressure. Inflation expectations climbed to 3.1% in April, according to the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Survey. Former Australian Prime Minister and strategist Kevin Rudd put it bluntly, China isn't playing for 2025, it's playing for 2050. American farmers are feeling the pain first. The American Farm Bureau estimates that more than $86 billion in agricultural exports to China are at risk this year, mostly soybeans, corn, and dairy. Iowa-based Cooperative Landis reported a 37% drop in forward contracts with Chinese buyers this spring. At home, Walmart CFO John David Rainey warned during the company's April earnings call that tariff-driven input costs are pushing up prices on everyday goods. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that food prices rose 0.6% in March alone due to import shocks. This isn't just a policy clash anymore, it's a system redesign. According to the IMF's April 2025 outlook, global trade is splintering into regional spheres of trust. China now leads an economic bloc representing 33.6% of global GDP by purchasing power parity, surpassing the G7, which sits at 29.9%. Cross-border investment between the United States and China has fallen 58% year-over-year, according to the Rhodium Group. Chinese tech giants like Xiaomi and Huawei are redirecting new manufacturing to Indonesia, Egypt, and Mexico. Meanwhile, in Washington, Congress is weighing a proposal to bar federal pension funds from investing in Chinese equities, a clear sign that decoupling is no longer theoretical. Morgan Stanley's chief global economist Seth Carpenter summarized it perfectly. We may already be past the point where the two economies can fully reintegrate. This isn't decoupling, it's divergence. But if the old system is fading, what comes next? The real warning shot came quietly. On April 5th, China's central bank confirmed it had completed a cross-border energy transaction using the digital Yuan, involving a state-owned Chinese company and a Middle Eastern supplier. Financial Times sources confirmed the deal was worth $2.9 billion in crude oil, with no U.S. dollars involved. This isn't theory, it's verified execution. If China can scale this model and link it with CIPS, BRICS Pay, or regional oil trading networks in Africa and Latin America, it won't just bypass the dollar. It could redefine the global currency of consequence. So here's the question. If Beijing succeeds in making the yuan the default currency for trade, does Washington even get a seat at the table? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this analysis opened your eyes, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the rules of global trade are changing faster than anyone realizes.